if you don't have that skill and you've memorized your multiplication tables, then you are the student saying, when am I ever going to use this? Because it's not clear. Like by definition, you didn't have that piece. And so, yeah, math ends up being useless to you. That's ultimately the challenge, is that the majority of students don't have that conceptual understanding, according to the studies.
Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, a Core 4 parenting podcast for conscious, cycle-breaking parents ready to turn toddler tantrums into teachable moments. Hi, I'm Cara Tyrrell, a lifetime lover of littles, mom to 2 grown and flown girls, and an early childhood educator. Through the show, I teach you my collaborative parenting methodology for nurturing your little human's mind, body, and spirit. Because how you connect and collaborate in the first 5 years is how you raise happy, healthy kids who grow into the best version of themselves and find true success in school and life. You have math anxiety? Did you grow up struggling with it and don't want that for your kids? Today's guest, Dr. Aditya Nagrath, helps students overcome mathematics anxiety and is the founder of Elephant Learning, an online mathematics academy that promises to teach years of math in just a few months with a time investment of only 30 minutes per week. This was such a fun episode to record with Aditya. He is hysterical and brings this math idea, this conceptualizing of math, down to a level that makes perfect sense, not just for us, but for our kids, and keeps them on task and on grade level. I hope that you enjoy this as much as I did. Aditya, thank you so much for being here today. We are talking about math and little people and big people and math anxiety, and we all have it.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So I did quite a lot of reading to get ready for this episode because you have such a rich history in your own education that's associated with math. So could you just share with people a little bit about what led you to this point and how math felt like the right way to create an educational opportunity for kiddos?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a PhD in math computer science from the University of Denver. I guess I had some anxiety with mathematics coming through the system. We all overcome it in some way. From there, a professor of mine had started to show me some data on mathematics and what the early age education researchers know right now about early age mathematics education. And specifically for toddler years, for kindergarten years, what they found was that preschool mathematics was a better indicator of third grade reading scores than preschool reading, which is surprising because you think reading would lead to reading. And they found that like children that did more math in preschool were better readers, writers, and speakers later on. And a lot of this research came out of the School of Education over at the University of Denver. The professors there are still kind of working on like the best activities for students. But basically, we've gone through the research at Elephant Learning, and we've combined the best activities for teaching mathematics as a language to from counting through algebra, so to young students. And we've paired that with adaptive algorithms so that we are then tailoring the activity directly to the level of the student. So. And this helps alleviate a lot of the anxiety that young people would develop around mathematics. Almost half of first and second graders report having mathematics anxiety. And that's because 4 out of 5 students coming into kindergarten don't understand the teacher when it comes to the numbers and et cetera. Yeah, so that's kind of how we got here.
As an early childhood educator, everything you just said very much resonates. And I love how you talk about math as a language, right? When we walk into a school setting, we say, oh, what are your classes? And reading, writing, math. And it gets kind of put out of that language category. But there's a lot of vocabulary, as you just alluded to, and there's a lot of pre-knowledge. We talk a lot about pre-reading and a lot about pre-writing in preschool. So this pre-math, this knowledge that they need in order to walk into a traditional learning setting and feel confident, which of course is what we want, not the anxiety. We want that confidence boost for them that, ooh, this does sound familiar. Now I feel like I can stretch myself and learn that next skill.
Yeah, what it is for mathematics is just the quantities. So like the reason why mathematics, I think, gets put into a different category and also is more challenging in certain ways than maybe traditional language is that like it's very conceptual. So that's why like sometimes you walk into a classroom and they're talking about conceptual mathematics. They're really talking about mathematics as a language. And so like the way to think about it for parents is the color red. So like they learn the colors through inference. We show them a red ball, we show them a red truck, we show them, and they start to infer that red refers to the color of the object that you're showing them. In a similar manner, the same thing is happening for quantities, except for that, like they have to realize that, like, oh, well, there's the 2 describes the number of trucks or balls or etc. And so, like this combined with like this idea that like math is a doing, or like somehow like there's this sense of it's very tangible. Like you should let them play. I'm like, okay, cool, they're playing, right? But like, they also have to learn this language because ultimately, like the gap that we're describing here, what the research is describing, boils down to a language gap. And what kindergarten thinks is counting to 10 is like, can you give me 10 things? And the student's able to slide over 10 things and stop on 10. And when they do that, they're really demonstrating understanding of the word 10. And at the same time, they're holding 10 in their head to remember to stop at 10. Whereas like most parents, and including myself coming into this project, thought counting to 10 is saying the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that gap, right? So like that gap is the understanding gap that we're talking about because kindergarten starts at counting to 20. And if you can't do that to 10 and, you know, like now we start talking about 11 and 12, this is challenging, right? And it's 2 digits to 11, 12. So that's also confusing to young people because like they've only seen one character at this point, really. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. So,
right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you were making me think of this fantastic story. I recently was driving along. I had a couple older toddlers in my back seat, a 4 and a 6-year-old. So not really toddlers anymore, just forever in my heart they are. And we drove by a bunch of cows. And I said, I wonder how many cows are in that field. And the 4-year-old yelled out some ridiculous, extraordinary wrong number. And the 6-year-old, who has just finished a year of kindergarten, said, I don't know how to count that fast. And I said, oh, you know what you can do is just take your best guess. It's called an estimated guess. And I wanted to really encourage her to use that number sense that you were just talking about, that I can see a group of things and quickly identify the number associated with that group of things. And it was fun. And luckily we were on a road where there was more cows later, and she got a chance to practice her new conceptual math skill.
Yeah, lots of fun.
I'll get you back to this episode in just a moment. But first, a quick question. Does your toddler struggle with transitions? Instantly erupt into tears when you ask them to clean up, come eat dinner, or worse yet, put on their pajamas? Let's be real. You have a superhuman daily to-do list, starting with getting out the door on time. But all you say is, it's time to... and they're tantruming. Why? Transitions are hard for toddlers. Transition is change, and no one really likes change, especially toddlers. Transitions are hard because they require executive functioning skills your little one hasn't learned yet. They are ready to learn impulse control and delayed gratification, and you can teach your toddler to successfully transition without tears. How? Just go to caratyrrell.com/transitions or use the link in the show notes to grab my 4-step tantrum-free transitions guide and get ready for some connected, calm, cooperative, tear-free transitions. I want to ask you about your program because Elephant Learning is a digital application. And so these kids are doing clearly well-researched and well-thought-out, fun, gamified applications to learn this language of math, but they are doing it in isolation and they are doing it on a screen. So when people come to you and they say, well, what about the real world applications? Like, how do they know that what they did on their tablet is what they're going to do driving down the road looking at cows? What do you say to that?
What we do in the system is that, right? So like, even if you're not interacting with a human, most of the time, the student is kind of understanding the conversation that's happening within the system, right? So we'd say to them, like, how many things are here? And this is a good example of what we call the recognize phase. So there's 3 phases: define, recognize, produce. Produce is like, give me so many cows, right? Now they really have to figure it out, right? So like, we're running these phases and we're identifying which level they're at and which concepts they're ready for based on prior knowledge, right? So like, for example, you can't learn multiplication without understanding addition, right? So that's not going to happen in our system, because if you can't show me proficiency in addition, we don't try to go to multiplication. It's automated, but it's not automatic, right? And so like, the parent conversation was never really removed from our mission. You know what I mean? Like, our mission is to empower children with mathematics. So on the dashboard, we have the teacher training that we would give to teachers of the conceptual mathematics, but we have it in plain language for the parent.
Nice.
And we also have activities that they can do outside of the system that sound like, which, well, yeah, if you're driving past some cows, maybe try this, right? So suggestions and like the idea behind it, so that like, if you're the parent or you're the teacher and you have to think on your feet, like, yeah, okay, that does look like the idea. I could try to do it, because I mean, it's everywhere. It's just, can we get it to fit with the level of the student? And then beyond that, like, we recommend the why method. So like, if they're in the system and you can identify where they're struggling, then like, you let them answer incorrectly. And then you ask them, why do you think that's the right answer? And this works for things outside of mathematics as well. So like, if you notice they're using words incorrectly, you can, well, why do you think that? Oh, okay, this is the difference, right? And you'd be able to identify, at least up until algebra, most parents are able to do this. So we also have math coaches now. After we introduced algebra, it's like, here's a coach. So like, even if you are kind of anxious around this, the coach will help you, the coach will help the student. And so like, they run the why method for you, basically.
Oh my gosh. I love this 360 wrap approach, because one of the things, especially as a teacher and a parent, actually, I've been both sides, and is that there's a lot of this talk about the old math, new math, right? That school systems bring in a curriculum and they use it for a while, and then they try a new curriculum, and then there's a new methodology around how you teach it and a new methodology around how you do it. And this has been a huge struggle for parents who are like, I don't know how to do division that way. So it sounds like your program not only is on top of, like, obviously these kids go to school, right? It's an additional program. And I read that it's 30 minutes at a stretch. It's not that long, but you're wrapping the parents into the programming so they don't have as much anxiety.
That's right. So, well, it's 10 minutes per sitting. So three times 10 minutes, so 30 minutes a week. So like, an average of 30 minutes a week is what we measure our results on. But yeah, I mean, the idea is like, the goal is to empower children with mathematics. And so like, the goal actually was to try to get the student to understand the teacher in the classroom. So as the teacher's teaching all these ancillary topics that might come up, the student is prepared for it. And the stuff that we're doing is in a straightforward manner so that if the parent came in and hit try, they're not going to be confused by it, right? Because like the real challenge is that the new math is the conceptual math. But the problem is that like these physical ideas, these concrete ideas that we're trying to represent in number form don't translate to the board very well, right? You have to somehow touch four things either on a screen or actual four things, right? Montessori would say, do actual four things. Like, it makes sense, right? But in lieu of that, this thing acts like four things on a screen. So that's what it is, right? Like, so we want to fill in that base language so that when they get into the classroom setting, it's easy for the teacher, it's easy for the student, and they're at the level of participation because right now, according to the statistics, it's totally possible that you have a third grade student whose understanding of numbers rivals that of a kindergartner, and they're learning how to multiply. And this is an impossible situation for both the teacher and the student. So like the only thing we can do is let's get the student up to the level of the classroom.
So, if you've been listening to my show at all, that I'm a huge advocate for the COVID generation and the parents who are raising these kids. Now, let's take a couple of examples, right? Let's take these third graders that you're talking about. They were in their last year of preschool when COVID hit.
Sure.
4 years, right? When we start to do COVID math.
Well, the statistics I'm citing, by the way, are pre-pandemic. So
yes,
it's likely gotten worse, but the problem ends up being the same or similar in that the level of language doesn't match the understanding of the classroom. It's just really hard to do. Let me let you continue with your question. Sorry for
absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to point out, because the research that I've been doing in that area is showing pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and it went from bad to worse, right? Which you very clearly inferred. But what we know in the education sector is that when kids start out behind, they end up further behind. That gap does not automatically or intrinsically fill simply because they went from kindergarten to first grade to second grade. So when we're looking at kids who are struggling and parents are identifying the struggle, do you have an intake process? Do you have an assessment process that says to parents beyond their parent-teacher conferences, math specific, here is where they are and here is where we'd like to get them to? Yeah.
What we do in our system is we assign an elephant age to the student based on a placement exam. If they're younger than 5, they kind of just start out with counting, and there's just not enough materials for students that age for us to make a placement exam out of it. It is the placement exam. But older than 5, we start them basically with counting. And the idea is that you're testing out of the subjects. So like if you're showing me proficiency, then you're going to the next subject. If you're showing me proficiency, you go on. And this continues until they're not showing me proficiency anymore. And what this ends up doing is it ends up gearing these complicated algorithms that are keeping track of this map of math ideas in like the order that they should be built up in, according to me and the other professor of mathematics that sat down and said, like, how are we going to do this? But like, it turns out that when you measure it, on average, children in our system learn, according to the last study we did, 1.67 years of mathematics. They used it just under 40 minutes per week on average. And that was from counting through algebra. And the numbers are similarly high, like if you look at age groups and demographics and et cetera. So like we just published the kind of broad study, but this summer to help try to get into schools, we're going to try to go back and maybe dice the data a little bit further, look at classrooms that we've had come through the system, et cetera. So we'll have a lot more data coming out soon.
All right. So let me see if I can say that again, because that was a really important statistic. Over 1.5 years worth of curriculum math learning in how long?
It was 13 weeks, and it was about 39 and some minutes per week on average. And we're supplemental, so that's not all the topics. But that's where I'm saying is we're focused on the essential topics. So like, just as an example, so everyone could get the idea, if I can get you to understand addition, then addition with money or addition with time is not that far off. But if you don't understand addition and you start doing addition with money and time, it's just really complicated because you're learning two abstract ideas now. And so the idea is that like we make all the other conversations easier because they have that base understanding of the essential topics.
Oh, I love that. I remember in high school, one of my math teachers, because I'm a very literal person, I love strategy and, I try to figure things out. And they finally came up to me and they said, if you learn the concept, you can solve any of the problems I throw at you. Let's see if you can refocus and just learn the concept. And I've taken that advice with me for the rest of my life. And it's one of the reasons that I love math so much. When my kids were little, they're adults now, they're 19 and 21. Curious George was one of the newer PBS programs out there. And I'd watch it and they'd be enamored with George. And I'd be like, math, 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 math. They're learning their pre-math skills through the monkey. So it's wonderful that you have kind of taken that and next leveled, right? Looked at the gap. How do we fill the gap? This is going to help solidify them. Their skills will be ready to apply to whatever their teachers ask them to do.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're saying there about like, if you can understand the concept, this is actually the definition. That's the best part. So like philosophically speaking, in the standards, the way they define understanding of multiplication is, can you see a problem in the world and then identify the numbers that you need to multiply in order to get the answer? And the word problem is the replication of that, right? That's the best we could do potentially on a piece of paper. And obviously with a computer, right? So in our system, we don't do the word problem written out. We do the word problem as a puzzle. So now it's a gamified word problem, right? The thing is this, is that if you don't have that skill and you've memorized your multiplication tables, then you are the student saying, when am I ever going to use this? Because it's not clear. Like by definition, you didn't have that piece. And so, math ends up being useless to you. That's ultimately the challenge, is that the majority of students don't have that conceptual understanding according to the studies. That's tragic because memorizing your multiplication tables for no reason can be considered torture.
Oh my gosh. I have to share this with you. You just made me think. So I was the kid, right? Of course, I memorized all my tables. I had a prize that went home with me. Yeehaw. My husband is the math tragedy here. He went through, we both grew up in Southern Vermont, and he was the kid that just was not an effective method for, and just got pushed through and pushed through and pushed through and became more disillusioned and more frustrated. The thing is, he's brilliant as a contractor. He has his own construction company, and it's so, you can go so far as to show him a picture of the thing that you want him to build with no plans, and he will replicate it and even make it better. And he swears to me he does not do math.
Software engineers will tell you they don't use math very often, but like that's the phobia of it. The thing is that like, and this is the line that we use now, right? Like they tell you they're not going to use it, but they're using variables and functions on a daily basis. The real challenge is that like the ego tends to want to complicate. So then as we try to explain it then to younger children, rather than simplifying, we're complicating. And so that's then kind of what our system does very well. We just simplify, like here's, right? And now if you want to do that complicated thing, well, okay, fine. It's a small hoop to jump through. Like the best way I can explain it is this way: is I went into my kid's classroom, and up there on the walls, they had like they were doing like tens place, hundreds place, and they had like dots representing, and like and she was saying, when the dot moves from here to there, it's 10, right, each time. So it's like, okay, I got what you're trying to do here. And the thought that I had was like, but our system does this very simple. And then the next thought I had was, okay, but like this was the ancillary topic, right? And she's like, Elliot breezes through this. And I'm like, I bet. Because like he understood like the basic idea, right? And so like the way we do the same thing in our system is like we have rows of 10, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, 10, 20, 30, 40. Oh, okay, right. That's the second place. And
Can we
this is
talk
where
about your
like,
kids?
yeah,
I'm
sure, why
so
not?
curious. I'm so curious because you have a 7-year-old and you have a 2-year-old. So let's talk about your
Right.
kids for a second. Is Elliot's must be the 7-year-old?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
So he's kind of taken this evolutionary journey alongside you as you built this company. And I'm sure that you were like, here, try this, here, try this, here, try this. What are you doing with the 2-year-old? Is it happening at this age bracket or are you waiting a while?
I'm not in a big rush because like I don't have the pricing pressure that the parent has. So like I don't have to pay on a monthly basis because I paid in sweat labor coming in. But the idea is like I think Elliot started maybe just before he was 4. I'm just waiting for them to kind of be ready and show some maturity with the tablet and like some interaction. I think Elliot literally kind of played with it for like a month or two before he started taking the prompt seriously. Like just the sounds it was making, he was like, "Wow, look at these sounds!" And then he'd like be done with it. And then like finally one day he came in and asked him a question. He's like, "Oh, wait a second, I can answer the question and like it'll interact with me." So then that's kind of when it started. But yeah, like right now, working on the fractions, decimals, and percentages type stuff. And I want to get on a little bit further because he has all these science books that like everyone's trying to buy him, but they don't like check to see like, is it really close to age appropriate? It's like, can I have 3/4 of a cup of water? Yeah, which 7-year-old can understand that, right? But he's close. I'm like, look, I think you're close enough to do this because I'm looking at what you're doing over here. So like now I'm looking for the measuring cup and we don't have an appropriate one. So like, but like, it'd just be nicer if he got a little bit further along so that like he's registering in the same place as the science book and I don't have to try to show him the same thing. But like either way, right? Like if I explain it to him, that's fine. I just want him to get it at some point.
I love that you brought STEM or STEAM, I guess, as it's now being called into this, because the math component really is one of those spaces, but the science holds its own space and then they share space, as you just told us about in the kitchen. It's one of the best places. So I love that. The STEAM movement, the STEM movement, it's really also attached to what these kids are doing at home and then transfers to what they're doing in school.
Well, so what it is specifically is the language of algebra. So like algebra would be the mathematical equivalent of the 3rd grade reading level. You can't do any of the sciences. You can't do any of the statistics or finances or just you can't do any of these things without variables and functions and the ability to speak slightly abstractly, right? Because X is the number of dollars in your bank account, or like X is the velocity, or you need, so many cups of water, right? Like, oh, we got to proportion it. So like fractions, decimals, and percentages. And so it feels like, right, like everyone's like, oh, well, we want these kids to learn the sciences, but we don't really have that early focus on mathematics that we need to provide in order for them to do it. Which, by the way, is kind of one of the things that we founded Elephant Learning on, right? Like the whole problem with this system, and I'm not like trying to get political or anything, but like the entire issue is that like we tell children that they can grow up to be anything they want to be. That used to be the American dream when I was growing up. But the problem is that it was over at kindergarten. They never had a chance.
Yeah, I've had a lot of guests in the last 4 months or so who talk about how learning in the United States is changing, how the opportunities for learning and the choices of the different educational models that parents are choosing for their children, the unschooling, homeschooling, world learning. The nomadic lifestyle is coming back post-COVID. Everyone's like, oh, this was really great to be able to go anywhere and still access education for our kids. So I can see how your product here and your amazing opportunity would fit into a lot of different learning choices and lifestyles. Now, beyond the app, which is amazing, you also have a couple books. Why don't you tell people about those?
Sure. So Rethinking Math Learning was our first book. It was designed for parents, for them to help kind of get around this mathematics as a language idea. So that's what that's about. There might be a second version someday, but like recently we did treating mathematics anxiety. So like this book is basically our coaching program. So like we train our coaches to be able to help parents with math anxiety. And we're not talking about just the Y method that we discuss here, though that's in there. But like we talk about what is the basic challenge for students when it comes to math anxiety, was for all humans really. And we introduce analogy with basketball, because like this is kind of the thing, is that when it comes to sports, it's kind of okay for the ball to not go in the hoop. But for some reason with education, people tend to freak out when the ball doesn't go in the hoop. This is why they're saying, why are you doing this to our 3-year-olds? We're not doing anything. Sometimes the ball doesn't go in. It's not a big deal, right? Like they got to learn the language. Let's not prevent them from doing that just because sometimes they got it not correct, right? Like they're 3-year-old. So it really helps kind of alleviate the anxiety for both the parent, for the student, and actually we wrote it for teachers and administrators. So like in the back couple of chapters, it's kind of about like, how would you use this in a classroom? How would you use this in a school or a district? So it's good for everyone. Good stuff.
Wow, that's amazing. You have done so much work in this space. It's clearly a mission and it's working. The research, I see all the beautiful testimonials over there on your website, and not just from parents who were like, okay, my kid needs help, but also from teachers, from educators who are saying, this is a great addition to what my kids are learning in the classroom as well. I thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and this expertise that you shared today. People are going to take so much away from this episode. We will have your books and we will have your website in the show notes. So everyone just go click on those and check it out. And is there a specific way that they can get in touch with you or your company if they want to take the next step?
Yeah, Facebook or LinkedIn, or check out the link on the show notes. That's the thing to do.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate all your effort and energy towards raising whole learners and look forward to seeing what happens next.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Until our next episode, stay mindful and proactive as you transform the toddler years.